Hello, beloveds. I get to say something I've been wanting to say like my whole ministerial life, but it doesn't really work in our community. He has risen! And so has he, and so has she. I just was so excited driving over. I was like, I get to say the Christian thing! But one of the things I want to talk about today is the metaphor behind the idea of resurrection, which is actually a perennial wisdom idea and metaphor and story that predates Christianity, goes all the way back. The first known story of resurrection that we know of is the Egyptian god Osiris. And there are many, many, many resurrection stories throughout the faith traditions, throughout indigenous culture, and what I will posit today, in our own very lives. Resurrection, rising up from heinous condition, is something I think we all know something about. Yes? 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 So I want to share a resurrection story of a little girl, 5 years old, violently raped, hospitalized, and the next day, her offender was released from jail and was murdered. Sounds about as heinous as the Jesus story and the Osiris story, right? For the next 5 years, because she believed it was her fault that this man was killed, this little 5-year-old girl did not speak for 5 years. Not a word, not a hum, not a whistle. But during that 5 years, she read every book she could get her hands on. And she was a little black girl in the South in a time when there was a black library and a white library. And she read every book in the entire black library and then managed to sneak just about all the books in the white library. This was Maya Angelou. When she came out of her silence 5 years later, she had found her voice. And when she started, they could not stop her. She would not stop speaking and writing and using that voice for the rest of her days. And I would say she's been a game changer in the lives of countless, countless people. I would call this a resurrection story. What about you? Yes. And if she can rise, if Osiris can rise, if Jesus can rise, so can you. Amen. So I want you to take a moment right now and gather up memory, gather up stories from your own ancestors, from history, from modern current culture. And I want you to think of somebody who you could gather inspiration from that has done a resurrection of their own. I want you to think of at least one person right now that you could draw inspiration from, because maybe Osiris isn't your dude. Maybe Jesus isn't your dude. But I want you to find a resurrection story that you can lean on in these days. That could maybe, like Maya Angelou, inspire you to find what I believe was her divine nature in those 5 years of silence. Funny that a 5-year-old practiced silence for 5 whole years and stillness. And in that practice, which I would call a spiritual practice, she discovered her nature. She discovered her true self that was unstoppable, that was full of wisdom and power. And so I want you to think of someone who could give you that kind of like, wow, if they did, I can. Everybody have somebody in mind? Shout their names out for me.
Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Kataji Brown Jackson, hallelujah, amen. Anne Frank, yes. Mary Magdalene, she's one of mine.
My grandfather.
Your grandfather. For those of you online, put it in the comments feed for us. Alexis Lindsay.
Yes. My daughter.
Ah, my mama said me. That's very sweet, Mom. These are the stories that are closer to us sometimes than those sacred texts, than those mythical figures. And these are the stories that we can rest on as our own holy, sacred text, stories and fables. Because they're no different. These holy people, these incredible, iconic figures are no different than you and I. Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind, our teaching, said, "If we allow the world's opinion to control our thinking, then that will be our demonstration. If, on the other hand, we rise superior to the world, we shall create a new pattern. If, on the other hand, we rise superior to the world, we shall create another pattern." I want you to think about this. Now think about your person, who you chose. What new pattern did they bring forward as a result of their rising up? What did the change that their rising up make possible? Because that is what it's about. The courage to rise isn't about just like, I'm just going to be a good person and rise above. I'm going to suck it up and deal with the BS and rise above. It is about changing the game. It is about making a new pattern. It is not about, I'm just going to do this and really just step aside. I'm not actually going to rise. I'm just going to step aside and pretend that this doesn't bother me. Or Maya Angelou could have stayed silent. She could have just sucked it all in and let it keep her quiet for the rest of her days. And instead, she changed the entire pattern of the publishing industry as a Black woman writer and dancer and singer and producer and creator. That is rising up. Christianity was a alternative, kind of out there religious teaching in Jesus' day, persecuted for this crazy talk that God, the kingdom of heaven, was within. Crazy talk. Killed for it. And yet it has become the game changer in millions of lives more than 2,000 years later. Changed the pattern. This is a courage that I believe is divine, that we all have access to. This courage, this ability to rise when nothing around you in the world says you can, says that you should. When you might be the only one thinking a thing. You might be the only one who says, you know what? I might be a little poor Black girl from the South, but my story is valuable and important, and I believe people need to hear it. Who does that? Maya Angelou did it and opened the door for hundreds and thousands of others to do it. pattern change, bringing something new forward, regardless of what the world is doing and saying and looking like. Go back to your person. Go back to the person you chose as inspiration. And I want you to really wrap your head around what it is that they rose superior to. I'm thinking about Anne Frank. I'm thinking about this young woman rose superior to her own imprisonment as an attempt to save her own life that did not work. And rose superior to that circumstance. Changed the pattern and left a legacy that continues to change lives today. This is possible for every single one of us. Every single one of us. Ernest Holmes went on to say in the Science of Mind text that the resurrection is the death of the belief that we are separated from God. Every single one of these resurrection stories, every single one of us has the opportunity to call ourselves back to our divine nature. And one of the things I love about every single one of these stories, and I know it's true in every single one of the people that you chose as your inspiration, is they rose from these worldly circumstances. They rose from heinous circumstances, insane violence, insane oppression. And it was from that very circumstance that the rising occurred. It wasn't in spite of. It wasn't, again, the step aside, the workaround. It was an actual rising up from. I would offer that very circumstance is what did the lifting up. I want you to think about this for a minute. Now go back into a moment in your own life. A moment that you thought would break you. A moment that you thought you could not get back up again. Everybody got one? Raise your hand. Online, give me a thumbs up. And here you are. And here you are. And if we so choose, we can allow those very moments to be the thing that brings us up. Not only do we get back up, but we rise up superior, Ernest said. Superior to the world. We take that pain, we take that heartbreak, that heartache, and we let it lift us. And it's not easy. It's not easy. Those moments when you feel like you have been brought to your knees, what is it? What is it that allows you to get back up? It's God. It is the power and the presence of the Holy Blessed One that is in your very being, that you draw on, that says, okay, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I want it to not be happening. I would really like to punch every person in the face who's got anything to do with it. And yet there's this thing. There's this thing in us that says, get up. Get up. You're needed. Your very life is on purpose. You are here for a reason. Get up. This is the courage to rise. And we love to say in this teaching that the power and the presence of the One is in you. I believe one of the reasons Jesus was such a rock star was because he taught that that thing is within you. And for some reason in that time in history, people decided to listen. Because people been saying that. That this thing, this power, the greatest power in the universe, we might call it love. We may call it holy. I call it all of the above. That we have access to it. And it's often in those moments that feel like they will break us that we grab hold, that we find that power, that courage that we think we don't have, that we think this is not possible. This one might be the one that takes me out. And yet, here we are. And when we take the opportunity, again, I come back to Maya Angelou, that little 5-year-old girl who took 5 years. 5 years to gather it up, to connect to that thing that was so on fire in her that it carried her through the rest of her days, being a cultural game changer. And maybe if we just leaned in for 5 minutes and leaned in to that fire, that spark, that flame that resides in the heart of each one of us, and let it rise us. And I know that some of you might be thinking, I don't know how to get to it. I am feeling pretty beat up by these worldly circumstances, and I ain't got a fire right now. And what I would say is, yes, you do. If we can give ourselves permission to just hang out a little bit longer, to lead into that pain and give it voice, to lead into that grief and that heartbreak, whatever it is that feels like it might break you. And allow that very pain to set the fire. Allow that very discontent to ignite the rage that lifts you up. I was thinking about fierce love a lot this week. And I was thinking about how as I've gotten older, and especially motherhood has taught me about fierce love. That love doesn't always look like, rainbows and unicorns. Sometimes love looks like, oh, hell no. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give you a big, fat no on that. And I'm probably gonna have to tell you about yourself. Love looks like that too. It's fierce. I think about the mama bear with her baby bears out in the wild, and she can be a mile away foraging and hear her baby cry and come running. You ever seen a mama bear come running? That's fierce love. The kind of love that makes you stand up in yourself and say, no more. The kind of love that draws a line in the sand. This too is holy. This too is the power and the presence of the One rising in your being, giving you the strength and the courage to be a stand for what you know is true. Every single person you brought into your mind today, Osiris, Jesus, and I'm thinking about Isis and the lengths she went to go put Mr. Osiris back together. Every single one of these stories and these people, I want you to think about the fierceness that they stood for. And when we say power, it's become a dirty word. But I want you to think about the power in each one of these resurrection stories. The power required to be completely surrendered to a circumstance, and rather than wish it away, numb it out, run away, ignore it, deny it, all the things we do, right? We let it be so real in our experience that the pain and the misery and the grief and the suffering itself becomes the logs on the fire. Each one of us has that fire. And we can't access it if we're running away from the circumstances. If we're trying to numb out or be in denial, then we can't feel the fire. We can't find it. So think of your person right now, and I want you to think about their story and maybe even see it in your mind's eye. And I want you to imagine the moment when their fire got big enough that it just lifted them right on up, lift them up out of those circumstances. And then I want you to find that fire for yourself. And you know how you're going to find the fire? You're going to look eyes wide open at the circumstance in your life that feels like it's beating you down. I want you to find a circumstance right now in your life that feels insurmountable, that feels like it just might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And give yourself a moment. And open your mouths if you're willing, and just breathe it in, that circumstance. And breathe it all the way into your belly. Breathe it all the way into the center of yourself. And allow whatever feelings you've got about it to rise. Whether you're heartbroken, whether you're terrified, whether you're enraged. And we're going to sit in that for the next 60 seconds. We're just going to be with it. No running. You at home too. Just let it be. And then I want you to breathe underneath it. Breathe a little bit deeper and breathe underneath all those feelings. And notice that there's something more there. I want you to notice that the groundlessness that you may feel is being held by something greater, something more powerful than the fear and the rage and the sadness. But because you gave yourself the gift of being present to what is, you now get to go deeper. into a changeless what is. The one changeless, constant, reliable peace, which is your divinity. That kingdom of heaven that we're all looking for out here. It's right underneath that fear. And I want you to breathe into that and have the sensation, have the actual experience of the rising it brings, of the possibilities that begin to open and percolate in your mind. The something greater that now gets to come into being because you're willing to connect at your inner core with the truth of who you are, which is a divine emanation of the One. This, my friends, is the courage you need, the capacity you need to meet this moment, to meet this circumstance, to rise superior to whatever it is that's happening out here. It is right here, everything you've ever needed. I'm going to share a story with you. About 10 years ago, I wasn't feeling well and went through a process of stuff and tests and blah, blah, and doctors not listening and all the things, right? And found out not only did I have an autoimmune disorder, I had cancer. And I was 40. And spending some time in that process, and the process for me looked like I quit my life. I quit my life, literally quit my life. And I remember waking up one morning and being in prayer and meditation, and I saw a white box with a big red bow. And from that day forward, in that process of recovering myself, I woke up every day saying, I'm going to get my gift. Spirit gave me this image of a gift being given to me. And it came in the form of autoimmune disorder and cancer. Which, some may say is some BS, right? But what I will tell you is waking up every day and saying, I am not leaving these set of circumstances without a gift. And I left with more than one little pretty white box and a red bow. The gifts are countless that rose from those set of circumstances. And that's a choice we make. It's a choice we make to lean in and say, all right, Spirit, what you got? What are you gifting me right now? Because this is some BS. But I know how it works. I know about the power and the presence of the One. So I know there's an opportunity to rise here. Because I know how good God is. There is no other possibility. And so I invite you right now to commit yourself to getting the gift. To commit yourself right here and right now to take the time to get quiet, to get still, to lean into whatever those worldly circumstances are, knowing they are your launching pad. They are your opportunity to gift yourself into the power and the presence of the One that you are. You in?
Yes.
All right. I want to end my time with you today with another little piece of Maya Angelou. That poem, Still I Rise, which was beautifully portrayed in the video we watched earlier, was also put to music by Ben Harper. But I'm going to ask you to sing it with me. Yeah?
Yeah.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me down in the very dirt, but still like the dust I'll rise. Just like moons and like suns, like the certainty of tides, just like hope springing up, just like the air I rise, I rise, I rise, I rise, rise, rise. Sing it with me. I rise, I rise, I rise, rise, rise. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but just like life, I'll rise. I'll rise, I'll rise, I'll rise, rise, rise. At home, I'll rise, I'll rise, I'll rise, rise, rise. Out of the huts of history's shame, out of a past ruled by pain, I rise, I rise, I rise, rise, rise. We will what? We'll rise, we'll rise, we'll rise, rise, rise. Again, we rise, we rise, we rise, rise, rise. And so it is.